Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for your patience and thank you for joining us today. Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. We're very excited to present to you what we think is the future of RFP management. Today, we have a couple of great speakers, and we can see the excitement is mutual with all the signups we got for this webinar. First, I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters. Kurt Lewis is the chairman of the board for DirectRFP, and Jason Newbold is the chief operating officer for DirectRFP. Both Kurt and Jason bring over 20 years of experience in working with clients on RFPs, and they'll happily share their stories with you in today's presentation. My name is Dean Ara, and I'm part of the marketing team at DirectRFP, and I'll be your moderator for today. So for today's agenda, we'll start off with Kurt providing a quick overview of what we've seen in the challenges of running RFPs for both private and public sector organizations. We'll hand it off to Jason, who'll give you an overview of DirectRFP and the problem it solves. And then we'll spend the bulk and the majority of the remainder of today's presentation in a demonstration of the platform itself. We left aside about 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A at the end, which leads me to some housekeeping. Today's webinar is indeed recorded, and we'll be sending you the link later this week, so you can just sit back and relax and watch the webinar. If you do have questions, we invite questions on your GoToWebinar console. You'll see a questions section to on the top there. Feel free to ask as many questions as you like. For questions that we don't get to today, we'll send you a personal response, either from Kurt or Jason, to your question after the webinar. So, without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Kurt.
Thanks for the introduction there, Dean. And thanks everybody for attending today's webinar. We're very excited to launch DirectRFP. Before we get started, I'd like to just share a little short story on how we got here. Jason and I run a consulting company that works with large Fortune 1000 enterprises. It's basically been our business for the last 20 years. For our clients, we provide a wide range of strategic managed services around expense management, telecom and cloud strategy and migration services. This includes RFP management. For many of the Fortune 1000 companies, our clients, this would involve RFP creation, management, measurement, response validation, and awards. We often end up implementing all these solutions that were selected through the work with the vendors cradle to grave. Now, when we run these RFPs, these can be unbelievably huge. We run RFPs that have taken, we're talking about anywhere from 200 to 300 questions. We've seen as many as 700 questions. Each question has to be ratified by multiple departments that may include the IT group, legal, procurement, HR, operations, and senior executives. And each department may have multiple people represented. It was the procurement teams that were largely responsible for running these RFPs. However, those of you in procurement know that you've got to build a consensus with each team. I've seen and personally experienced the headaches that procurement teams have to go through to create, deploy, and manage these RFPs. In the last 20 years, we must have run over 1,000 RFPs. Now, that's a lot of RFPs and a lot of resources at a significant cost. And so we knew there had to be a better way, and there is. So at this point, we've experienced basically everything. And the two major pains, in my opinion, are creating RFPs and evaluating RFPs. And I'm sure those of you in procurement know that there's much more than this, but it's truly about finding the exact solution and vendor for your needs, weighting the questions and scoring responses, reducing the time spent creating RFPs because it can literally just suck the life out of you, getting as many vendors as possible to respond. Because as you know, the more responses you get, drive more competitive quotes, savings, and better fit solutions. We wanted a simpler, easier way to do this, and we needed to automate as much as possible. We wanted to get rid of the ambiguous, long, tiring, paragraph-based answers. We want buyers to get more responses from bidders, and we wanted bidders to enjoy the process of submitting an RFP. DirectRFP isn't new. It's been around for over 10 years, and now it's available to you. So I'm going to go ahead now and and hand this over to Jason, and he's going to go ahead and talk you through an overview of our vision, and then he's going to get into the demo. Jason?
Thanks, Kurt. Appreciate it. So guys, you heard those are the big challenges, and I think anybody who's run RFPs is probably very familiar with all of those challenges. What this all drove to from our standpoint when we worked with clients is we get this question a lot. What's the point of running the RFP? A lot of times the time involved in creating the RFP, getting everybody aligned on the RFP, coming up with the questions, getting the technical folks aligned with procurement outweighed actually the benefit of the RFP. So what we found is a lot of clients were running less RFPs, and the threshold to run an RFP continued to climb, if you will. And if you read anything, Gartners of the world talk about this, that there's a significant savings to be had by running RFPs. Again, if it gets outweighed by the resources and the time to run it, then there's really, you're defeating the purpose. So we looked at this, and again, because we worked side by side with our clients, we looked at how can we automate a lot of this process. So that's what we really focused on, is the automation of the process as much as possible. So one of the things we did, right, was take it from a paper-based system, and we've worked in systems where they will take your paper and they'll collate it, right? So that there'll be a document storage, but it's still a paper-based system. And we wanted to put it online. So we wanted it to be a web-based system that you could manage everything via. The other thing was, we talked to our clients about it, and they had all these legacy RFPs, and they didn't want to start from scratch recreating the wheel here. So I'm going to show you today how the system will actually allow you to take your legacy-based Word docs and CSV files and very easily upload them into the platform to allow you to manipulate it within the platform and create your RFP very quickly off of a legacy document. The other piece is, once you start running the RFPs in the platform, and we ran into this challenge a lot of times, is you run an RFP, and whether it's a year or 5 years later, things change in the environment. The RFP that you ran a year ago or 5 years ago is lost. The people that ran it are no longer there, have moved positions. So you really end up recreating the wheel and starting all over again. So because the system is all online stored, you're able to clone your existing RFPs that you ran a year ago, 5 years ago, and really quickly be able to get 8 miles down a 10-mile road in creating your RFP for the future. Last pieces were storage of the information. So again, if you've run an RFP in the platform, you will have a question library that will retain all the questions that you've run within the platform. So for future use, you're not hunting down documents and, when did we run that last RFP for these servers or whatever it might be, copiers, whatever you're purchasing. The other piece is it stores your vendor information. What's nice about this is it'll store your vendors across, you might have, 20 departments that run RFPs, IT, office products, purchasing. It'll store all the vendors. And if I'm in IT as an example, and Kurt is in the office products division of our company, it will store just my vendors. So I don't have to go through all of Kurt's vendors to get to the vendors I want to send out the RFP. And again, the system will allow, because it's all app-based, it'll allow you to track all the activity within the platform for future use. So we say this, we say DirectRFP is the first RFP platform to solicit exact and measurable responses. What does that mean? So we've, again, run hundreds, thousands of RFPs, both I'll call it the original way of running RFPs, put together 800 pages and send it out back 20, 30 years ago, to now electronic RFPs. And one of the challenges still remains in that is how you ask the questions. And I think that's one component here that we've really tried to work with our clients on, changing the way they ask the questions. And what we mean by that is you ask an open-ended essay type question, you're going to get an open-ended essay type answer, right? And I'll give you a real rudimentary example, but it probably proves the point. So, if I'm going to go buy a car, as an example, and I say, I want to buy a car, how fast is maybe one of the questions that's important to me is how fast does the car go 0 to 60? So you ask that, vendor A answers it, and they say, our car goes 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. Vendor B answers it and says, our car goes 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds. Well, if that's important to me, I might just go with vendor B, right? If that was the only question in my RFP. The challenge there is what may have happened is vendor B interpreted what you seem to think is a very clear question to say, well, in the fine print, that car goes 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, 4.6 seconds, but that's downhill at a 30-degree angle with an 80-mile-an-hour wind behind it, right? So the problem with that, and again, it's just a rudimentary example, but the problem with that is you leave a lot of room for interpretation and a lot of room for, clarity problems within it. So what we've tried to do is look at those questions and say, maybe there's a better way to ask this question for multiple purposes. The first is if we turn that question into a multiple choice question with some clarity around it to say, how fast does your car go 0 to 60 under normal conditions on a flat surface, right? And then you give them answers A, B, and C, right? Maybe I want a car, and this is the real core of it. What is your requirement, right? Is your requirement for the car that it goes 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds? If that's your requirement, then let's ask this question differently, and let's put some answers around it that drive to that response. So, answer A might be 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, in under 4 seconds. B might be 4 to 5 seconds, and C might be 5+ seconds. Now I can quickly get to the answers that I care about, right? Maybe A and B meet my requirement, A exceeds it, B meets it, and C, I want them thrown out to a certain extent. So we really tried to look at how we ask the questions. Again, this is a very rudimentary example, but I hope it proves the point that by asking the question the right way based on your business requirements, you can get quickly to a question and answer that you're looking for. And I'll explain as we go through this some other benefits of asking the questions this way. The other thing was a dashboard. So Kurt mentioned the big pains for us as well as our clients have always been the development of the RFP and then the evaluation of the RFP. So by putting this online, now I can have a live dashboard as vendors are responding to the RFP. I can see the progress, right? So I can see where they're falling, stack ranking amongst each other. So I'm not waiting. Again, traditionally what would happen, send out your RFP, wait 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever you're giving the vendors to reply, and then you start your evaluation, right? So you're starting it 6 weeks after and you have no visibility until that date. With this, you're going to be able to actually see and evaluate the responses as they come in throughout. So I might have 50% of the responses 3 weeks into it, and the system is going to start stack ranking those responses, and we're going to show you how that works today, so you can get to a decision a lot quicker. So to the point of measuring responses. So the other advantage to asking the questions in more of a multiple choice format and driving to the requirements of your business as opposed to asking an open-ended question is now in the multiple choice format, I can ask based on weights and scores. I can start scoring my questions before they're even answered. So using my car example, right? I can say, hey, if somebody answers A to that question, I want to give them a 4 out of 4. If they answer B, still meets my requirements, I'm going to give them 3 out of 4. And if they answer C, I'm going to give them 0 out of 4 because it just doesn't flat meet my requirements. The other part is I might have, 50 questions in an RFP, but again, I'm going to use a rudimentary example if I only have 2 questions. Maybe the other question I have for my car, for the car example, is, does it have leather or cloth interior? Maybe that isn't a requirement, but it's a nice to have, right? Which we all have asked questions that, and we all have to ask questions in RFPs that are more nice to haves than they are requirements. So you might want to weight your questions differently, and I'm going to show you how that works today in the system. And I might give the priority to of those two questions instead of them both being worth 50% of the RFP. I might make the speed question 75-80% of the RFP scoring, and I might make the second question only 20-25% of the scoring. So again, there's the advantage to that. So now I want to just real quick talk about the benefits, and I'm going to jump into the why you guys are all probably here is to see the actual tool and how it works and operates. So the benefits of the tool that we've seen in it is, again, you're trying to get to being able to compare apples to apples in an RFP. When you ask essay questions, right, gets very difficult to get 5 people, let alone just Kurt and I, to agree that response from vendor A is better than the response from vendor B when it's a 3-page, written essay. So by getting them to respond uniformly based on your requirements, you can drive the results ultimately you want for the business, which is what we're all here to do. It also cuts down, as we talked about, the time spent to manage the RFPs, and it allows you to manage multiple RFPs across multiple departments. So again, I'm going to show you today, if you are the head of procurement, the head of IT, and you want visibility to all the RFPs within your system and what each of the individuals is running, you'll be able to manage it through this one platform. Ultimately, we talked about the quicker turnaround time to select a vendor because of it being online and being able to manage it all online. You're going to be able to see and have visibility to it throughout the process. And the last piece here I want to just talk to for just a second is the vendor responses. So what the system does is if you invite vendor A to respond to an RFP and 2 years later they're responding to the same RFP, what we found with our clients is 70% of the questions that you ask in an RFP are asked whether it's 2 years later or you're running the same RFP annually. The reason being is the environment doesn't change that drastically. Maybe some of the requirements, the answers you're looking for might change, but the question itself stays in place. So it stores those answers for the vendors. And where this is probably a benefit that initially, candidly, when we were building this, I don't know that we thought about, but it's turned out to be a huge benefit, is by storing the vendor responses. We had a lot of vendors that used to either A, no bid to RFPs because they were just too cumbersome and they didn't have the resources. And so what happens is a lot of times you may not get all the right vendors that you want bidding on a process. And I use this example, Amazon. Like Amazon or hate Amazon, they've changed the way we all do retail today. And the reason they've changed it is because I used to want to buy a widget. I'd drive down to the widget store and go buy the widget there. Now I can go online and I can see 40 people selling that exact same widget. I can see where they're ranked, and I can also purchase right then and there from the low price bidder. So they drive the cost down and they drive the results that I'm looking for, and they give me access to vendors that I otherwise wouldn't have had options to purchase from. So big advantage from a review standpoint. Audit was a big one for a lot of our clients. As Kurt mentioned, we work with a lot of Fortune 1000 companies, and there was a requirement with a lot of them that they have the capabilities to track every communication between them and the vendors, so that they weren't challenged at the end of the RFP process and have bid protests coming back from the vendors. So what they wanted was the ability to have a transaction that was tracked throughout the process. So again, because the system's online, all of the communication happens between the buyer, the vendor, through the system. All the data is tracked through it, and it's all time and date stamped, and I'll show you that within the system as to who did it, when they did it, and what they were doing within the system. Last piece, and then I'm going to jump to the meat and potatoes of this, which is obviously what we wanted to talk about is the demo. is the communication benefits. So again, talked about the vendors being able to communicate through the system. Candidly, a lot of the vendors that we do business with really like the system, because instead of the open-ended question that leaves some interpretation on both sides, right? Now you're asking a direct question within the system based on the requirements of your business. And hey, if they're not the right fit, they're not the right fit, but at least you know what the requirements are for the business. So again, it's a great system from that. All the communication between you and the vendor, so any questions coming from the vendor to the buyer all happen within the system back and forth. So it retains all that. So you don't have vendors saying, well, I didn't know about that, or I didn't see that. All of this happens through within the system. So with that said, I'm going to jump into the demo and actually show you how the system works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in. This is your login screen. When you get invited, if you will, or when you build your instance, you're going to have an email that comes out to you that invites you to it and gives you a default password. So I'm going to log in as Kurt here. And when you log into the system, you're going to get an initial dashboard of the RFPs that are in the system. And in this case, Kurt is acting as the manager, if you will, over multiple departments. So he's going to be able to view all the RFPs that are active in the system. How many are in draft mode, means we're still building the RFP. How many are open, meaning they've been released to the vendors. How many are pending, which means we've received the responses and they're pending award or closure. And then how many have been awarded within the system. The other thing you'll see is you're going to see all the folks that are under you working in the system. And I can expand this. So if I just want to see what Dean is working on in the system and what RFPs he's working on, I can quickly get a view of the RFPs he's working on, when they were created, the targets that we've put out there, which we'll talk a little bit about from a KPI standpoint, just in a quick snapshot without having to go into any one of the RFPs. I can also look at, again, the RFPs. If I select up here just draft or open, so if I just select open, I'm only going to see the open RFPs that are in the system today. And then I can, again, do the same thing. I can expand this, and I can see of the open RFP, or of this particular RFP, who the bidders are on it, what questions they have answered in the system, where they currently rank from a score perspective, and what their overall pricing is for the services that we're looking to procure. So it's a quick snapshot as a manager to see what's going on in the system, who's doing what RFPs we have out there. The other thing you can see on your dashboard is the messages. So again, I talked about how the messages between vendors and buyers happen within the platform. This is your quick snapshot of any messages that are in the system. Anything that's highlighted like this has not been answered. So I know quickly I need to get back to this particular person, and I can click here, and I'm not going to do it here today, but you can click in and go directly to the RFP message and respond to this user. The last piece is action items. And so action items you'll be able to see, and I'm going to show this to you in one of the RFPs that we have in the demo system here. You might have, for instance, a file. So in your RFP, you might have an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, that you want the vendor to sign before they can get into the RFP and actually start answering questions. So in this case, that's exactly what this is. It's pending form approval. So the vendor has actually signed this, and now it needs your approval. Once it's approved, now the vendor has access to go in and start answering RFP questions, et cetera. And then you've got your calendar. The calendar is just a quick snapshot of any important dates that are upcoming. In this case, I have a date where the last date for messages for a vendor is on the 29th of this week. So this is just a quick snapshot to understand what's going on within the platform. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into a demo open RFP here. So all you're going to do to hyperlink into this hosted voice RFP, I'm just going to click onto it, and it's going to take me directly into the RFP. And this is going to look the same. I'm going to show it to you in a little bit, how you create RFPs, but it's going to take you through this exact process, right? So it's we call it our 7-step process. It's going to take you to a home screen to start with, and the home screen is going to tell you a little bit about the RFP. It's going to tell you if you have any attachments or files. It's going to tell you how many bidders you've invited, the questions that you have within the RFP, and obviously if it's been awarded or not. There's a description, which I'll talk about in just a minute when we get to the About tab. Your calendar, again, your important dates within this particular RFP, and then it's going to give you a dashboard of your bidders and where they're at within the RFP. It's also going to give you a quick view of the users that you've invited to the RFP. These are not bidders, these are internal users. And then your files, as I mentioned before. Messages within the RFP, any action items you have within the RFP, and then just an overview of the pricing. So this is the steps you would take to actually build the RFP. Again, this one's already been built, but it's going to be the exact same steps. So you're going to put whatever you want to name your RFP. You're going to start with, you may have an internal project number. We had this request from clients of ours that they wanted to track the RFP against an internal project number. So you populate your project number if you have something internally. You're going to pick the service type, and this is just a drop down that can be customized to whatever service types you're running within your RFPs. Then you're going to have a welcome message. This is what the buyers are going to see when they log into the system. So this is just a brief description of what you're putting out to bid and you know, maybe some instructions, if you will, for the vendors that are looking to bid on it. You're also going to have a description. The description, as it says here, is for internal use only. So really what this is for, and where our customers use this today, is to communicate to within the business, right? People that are just looking at the RFP, maybe the executive leadership team. What is the purpose of this RFP? What are we trying to do? This is nothing that gets disclosed to the actual vendors. This is for internal only. Then you're going to put in on this page the target launch, close, and award date. And the way we've worked with a lot of our clients, I'm sure you guys are very similar, is you kind of work backwards on this, right? So a lot of our clients will tell us, listen, we need to have a new solution implemented by, you know, August 30th. So working backwards, we need to put a target award date of July 27th because it's going to take 30 days to implement that solution. We need to close it by June 29th in order to make that decision, and we better launch it by June 19th in this case. So this is where you're going to put the targets. This isn't actually the launch dates, but what this does is this measures for, again, yourself as well as management. It measures if you're on track to attain this as you run through the RFP process. So when you're done with that, you would hit save and continue. You're going to go into user access. Now this is where you add users internal to you. So let's say I am the head of procurement and I'm running an RFP here for this hosted voice, but I need Kurt to also be on this, and I need Kurt because he's my technical guy on security. I need Kurt only to deal with the security portion of this. So Kurt is only, when he logs in, only going to have access now to the security side of things, and he's only going to be able to affect and edit anything within the security section of the RFP. So he's not going to be able to touch or see network support, general reporting, technical, or hardware. So it gives you the ability to quickly assign sections to individuals and give them access types. So the way this would work, we've already got people built in here. I would type in who I want to add to the RFP. Put their email address in here, give them their permissions, what I want them to do within it, and I'm going to hit the send button, and they're going to get an invite to this RFP when they log in. Their dashboard at this point, if this was my first RFP I was working on, all that would show on my dashboard is this hosted voice over IP or hosted voice RFP. So that's all that person would see. So once you're done inviting the folks to the RFP, you're just going to simply hit continue, and it's going to take you to the files section. So the file section, again, we have a lot of customers that have terms and conditions that they've got to have the vendors acknowledge and review before moving into the RFP. We might have NDAs, like in this case, that the vendor has to sign before going into the RFP. So the way you're going to do this is you're just going to click add a file. We're going to upload a file, and it's as simple as you drag it over here, or you click to browse on your computer, and you're going to drop a file right into here. Then you have three options. So maybe this file needs a signature and upload before they can view the RFP, or maybe it's something where, no, I just want them to actually open it. So examples of this would be an NDA. You might want them to sign and upload before they could view the RFP. So everything from this point forward would be grayed out. They wouldn't be able to go into these stages without having filled out the file. Or it might just be something like I mentioned. It might just have some terms and conditions. So we want them to open the file and review it before they can view the RFP. So once they open it, there's nothing needed on your side, the buyer side. It's only the vendor has to open it, review it before they can move on. Or it can be a total optional file that just talks to the background of the RFP for the vendor, and whether they open it or not, it's not going to prevent them from moving forward in the RFP. So you're going to select that. You're going to throw your file in here. You're going to put a date if there was a submission date. So let's say we wanted them to have to submit within the first week, this file. And then you're going to click add the file, and it's going to upload it into the platform. And what you're going to see is a file much like this with whatever rules are associated to it. So in other words, this one's optional. The vendor is going to be able to see everything within the RFP without even viewing this file if they wanted to. So the next section after the files is your questions section. So this is probably the meat and the potatoes of it, right? And this is what I really was talking about when I talked about changing the philosophy of how we run RFPs. So
hey, Jason, real quick, you may want to, in the user access, just show the assign section and then jump right to this one.
Oh yeah, how you assign it, you mean?
Right.
Yeah, so I had mentioned that when we first jumped onto this page, but I'll recap it. So again, when I add the user to this, I'm going to be able to assign them to just any one of these sections or all the sections if I want that user affecting and viewing all the sections within the user access or within the RFP. So in the actual questions, here is the way we develop this. So the questions, as I mentioned, are all scored and weighted within the platform. So you can see the weighting over here, and you can see how each of these sections has their own weight, and it's all divided evenly except for the ones we've changed. So I can go in here and say, this general section is actually more important than any other section. So I want to make this worth 20. I want to make this worth 30% of the RFP. What it's going to do is take the remaining sections that haven't been weighted and evenly distribute it to make it worth 100%. So what you can also do here is, let's say I want to start over again. The weighting, I want to make this all even. I can reset the weights. So this is by default how everything comes in. It's going to weight each section evenly, and it's going to weight each question within the sections evenly. So that's a bad example because there's only one. But here's all the questions weighted evenly. Then you can start going in here and reading some of these and going, this network operations center question is really the bulk of what this section needs to be weighted at. So I'm going to put it at 50%. And then what it'll do is evenly weight the remaining 100%. The remaining 50%, if you will, through the other 4 questions. So it's a great, quick way to get to an ultimate score, which I'm going to show you here at the end. Other thing you can do is within the questions themselves, I can edit these questions. So if I decide I want to change this question, I can do this here. If I want to add some additional instructions to the question, I can do it there. And then here's my answer. So if I decide, I don't need 13 plus data centers, I can delete out that, and I'm going to end up, once I save this, with only 3 answers in the system. I can convert it to essay. I can change the scores of the answers. So again, using the example that I had earlier, by using maybe 8 centers is what I require. So I'm going to give that a 4. That's 100% of what I'm looking for. I'm going to make the centers 4 to 7 only worth 2. And if they only have 3 network operations centers, I want it to be worth nothing, almost a disqualification on this particular question. I'm gonna save it, and what's gonna happen? Well, that didn't work. What's gonna happen is, I guess I didn't delete this centers, but what's gonna happen is it's gonna change the scores according to what I just put in for each one of them. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Back to the questions. The other thing you can do within the questions and the sections is I can reorder them. So again, if I'm in the very easily, if I decide I want to take this question and move it down, it's just a quick drag and drop, and I can move my questions however I want them within the platform and save. So now my questions are going to be reordered, where my question 1 became question 2 and moved them all around. Weighting stays the same. None of that changes in doing so. So the benefit of doing this is all driving to the results, right? And I purposely chose an open one here to kind of show you something that's in flight from a results standpoint. So from a results, you can go real quick and see a snapshot of each of the vendors, all the sections being reviewed, and you can see a quick side-by-side of all your vendors, how they stack rank across the entire RFP. Or what I can do, if I decide, is I want to look at just one section, right? So I can, or maybe 2 sections. So maybe I want to look at technical and I want to look at support. So if I click just those 2, now it's going to stack rank 2 of the 7 sections, and it's gonna rank everybody based off of what they scored in just those 2 sections. So it's a quick, again, snapshot review of how the vendors are doing as it's live, right? As it's taking place, the RFP. The other thing you can do here is you can go in and you can edit the questions. Again, we talked about the whole digital trail. So this shows you when it was answered, who answered it, right, from the vendor side. It also says this was scored and highlighted. It was edited by Kurt Lewis on this particular date, which was yesterday. So what this does is, I'll give you my kind of my car example or my analogy here. You could ask a question, and this is where, you know, human intervention still is needed at some level, but what we're trying to do is get the buyers 9 miles down a 10-mile road here. So you could still ask a question, and you again think it's crystal clear. Can you provide services to all of our locations? Vendor A could answer yes. Vendor B could answer no. And then in the notes, vendor A says we can provide service to 99 of your 100, but they answered yes. Vendor B answered no, we can only provide service to 99 of your 100. So same answer, right? But they got vastly different scores. So this is where the human intervention part comes in. You may read that, come in here and go, all right, you know what? This vendor said yes, but the real answer is probably maybe. So I'm going to turn it to yellow, and I'm going to change their score. Instead of them, you know, in this case, we had already edited this, but instead of them getting 100, I'm going to give them a 75 on this from a score. I'm going to hit save, and what it's going to do is now see how their score just went down considerably. It's going to highlight it yellow. It's going to state that Kurt changed this on the 26th, and now their score has been changed to a 75% from in this case, I changed from 50 to 75. So you can real quick, and then it's going to adjust scores accordingly across the board for all the vendors. So it's a quick way to get in here and start weeding out the vendors that just weren't competitive versus the vendors that were very competitive, so you can get to talking to the folks that you want to talk to. So again, that's how the scoring works, and that's why we've seen the advantage of doing this from a review and selection standpoint. You can get there so much quicker doing it this way. So the next section after your questions is your pricing section. So again, with a lot of our clients, we have created pricing templates. So the pricing templates would get uploaded into the system here. And what this does is, again, if you leave the pricing up to the vendors to submit in whatever form that they choose to do so in, you're trying to also compare apples and oranges. So what we've tried to do is standardize pricing templates based on the products and services. So that way, when you get the pricing back from the vendors, it's uniform and it's very easy to compare side by side. Then what we do is we put the services kind of as a whole over here. So we ask the vendors to respond. If this is an IP telephony bid, we have a quantity of 200. The vendors will not see these two. This is really for you, and I'm going to show you this in the pricing results as the buyer. The vendors aren't going to see what your current spend is and what your benchmark spend is, but this is important to measure against when we talked about the targets on the dashboard and we talk about pricing results and where vendors fell. It's going to help you stack rank the vendors. So it's as simple as you're going to pick the type of service you want. In this case, we did IP telephony. You're going to pick the quantity. You're going to pick what your current spend is and what your benchmark. You're going to hit add service, and it's going to add it up here. And again, I'll show you this from the buyer side and what they see when we get done with this. So the other thing you're going to see is now the reason for those benchmarks were right here. So now you've got your vendors that have responded, what your quantity was that you requested, and they're going to respond with, yeah, we can provide all 200 in this case. They're going to put what their cost is. It'll give you an average cost per site. The system is going to benchmark it against the current and benchmark spend to give you what you fell at. So were they above or below what you were targeting? And in this case, these two were below and these two were above. So what it's going to do is graph it for you, tell you where each one of them fell from a total perspective. And then it's going to also show you according to the benchmark. So here's your benchmark. These folks were 7% below. These were 2 on up, right? So it'll give you a quick snapshot from an executive standpoint to be able to show that to the leadership team. So invitees. So again, I talked about how you can manage all your vendors in the system. I can invite vendors straight from here. This is where you're going to build your vendors to invite them to it. What we've typically done and we've typically seen in RFPs is you add a vendor. So I'm going to add AT&T as a vendor here that we've built into the system. You're going to add your vendor. Add AT&T. And then I'm going to go down. I'm going to hit continue. So now you'll see AT&T has been added as a vendor. What typically happens is when we send out RFPs is you'll invite one person from that vendor. So something like this, you'll invite one person from the vendor. When the vendor gets logged in, they're going to be able to add other users on their side, which I'll show you in a minute how that works. And they'll be able to also assign sections to those users. So maybe I want Jason, in this case, myself, only responding to the security. I don't want him messing with anything else. He's my security guy. So the vendors will also have the capability to assign all or just sections. Maybe legal, you only want them messing with the legal section, right? Not everything within the RFP. So they're not bogged down with having to filter through to get to it. So it made it a lot easier on the vendors to respond to it. So this is where you're going to invite the vendors. Again, they're not going to get the invite until you get to this section. So this is your review section. If you hadn't done everything in here, it's going to come back and give you a red X that you need to go back and do something. If you didn't invite enough vendors, if you didn't add at least one question, if you didn't score the questions, things along those lines, it'll come back to you and tell you you need to do this before you can move forward. Last step to open the RFP is you're going to put in the date you want the RFP to open and time. So you're going to simply select it and select the time that you want it and click OK. You're going to select when you want the last date for communication or messages coming from the vendors. And the last piece is when the last date for the RFP is due. Down here, what this is going to say is launch RFP. And once you hit the launch RFP, all the invitees over here are going to get an invite. And now I'm going to show you real quick what that looks like from the vendor side. So on the vendor side, here's what you're looking at. When they log in, they see your welcome message that you gave them, and they're going to have the first phase is they can no bid or continue, right? So real quick, if they wanted to no bid based off of this, they could, or they can always go back to it if they chose not to bid. This is where they're going to add their users, and I talked about these are internal to the vendor. So if they want to add, Lisa's the main contact here that we sent it to. She added me, but she only wanted me to view it. She didn't want me to actually edit anything in here, and she only wanted me to view the security portion of this. So it's only going to allow me, if I were to log in, to view the RFP and just simply look at the section that was assigned to me. Attachments, very simple. They're going to see the attachment that I showed you on your side. They're going to be able to download this attachment, review it, sign it if it requires signature, and upload it back into the system. Here's the questions, and here's what they see from the question side. So it's going to show them what questions they've answered. See how it has a red X here? It's telling them you haven't answered all the questions, and in this case, they've answered everything except for this top one in general. So if they come in and they answer this question, and let's say we answer it 8 to 12, and I hit answer. Now, green, everything looks good. I've answered all my questions. I can go to my pricing. Here's my pricing document that I can download and upload back into the system with my pricing. And again, I mentioned that the end user or the vendor cannot see your benchmark or your cost. They're just going to be required to put in what their cost is from a total standpoint. So here it might have the detail of all 200 locations. Here it will just have your total cost. They're going to hit continue. When they're all done, they're going to go through just like the buyer side. They're going to have the status of all of their sections. If they've done everything correctly, they would hit submit, and their RFP has been submitted to you. It's as simple as that from that standpoint. The only other thing I wanted to show you is the messaging. So from a messaging standpoint, here's the hosted voice RFP that we talked about. This is where the vendor will ask questions, and these will come to you via an email as the buyer. If you're assigned to the RFP, you're going to get an email that comes to you saying you have a new message in the system for the hosted voice over RFP from Lisa. And so you'll be able to hyperlink straight to that question from the email and respond to the question as the buyer. The vendors are always going to be private to you. You can, as the buyer, respond to things publicly. So it won't show who the message came from, but you'll be able to respond and all the buyers can see it. So if I ask a question as a buyer that is important or as a vendor that the buyer feels is important to post to everybody, they have the ability to post it and everybody's going to see it and get an email notifying them. So guys, that is the quick overview. There is a lot more depth to the system, but to be respectful of everybody's time, I want to cut it off there. I'm going to talk one more slide, and then Dean, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we can answer hopefully a few questions before the top of the hour. And again, as Dean mentioned, if we can't answer your question or if we can't get to it today, we will make sure we'll answer it privately to you as well. If you have any further questions, you want to know more about the system, please reach out to us at the end of the webinar, and we're more than happy to do a more in-depth private demo for anybody here. So the last piece is, here is how the system is built. There are three, if you will, access types. There's a buyer, there's a super buyer, and then there's the vendors, the bidders. The way the system is built is the super buyer, think of them almost as an administrator, right? So they're going to have the authority to add and remove your buyers. They're going to have the authority to give access to individuals, remove access to individuals, and they're going to have access to all the RFPs within the platform. The buyers, again, might be somebody who's just in IT procurement, and that's their only world. So they don't need access to Office products and everybody else. They're only going to have access to their world and be able to see and manage their RFPs within their world. Bidders, of course, are your vendors, and that's an unlimited group that we allow. You can put 1,000 bidders in there if you wanted to. So Dean, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. If we've got any questions that we want to answer, let's go ahead and try to do what we can now.
Perfect. Thanks, Jason. Fantastic presentation. We've got a whole bunch of questions that came in. I know we're short on time here, so I'm gonna prioritize a few of these because there's a couple of repeats. Again, if you want to submit a question, please do so in your questions section. Okay, so here we go. So the first one was asked by a number of folks, not surprisingly, what is the cost? And is there a setup fee?
Yeah, so let me go back to actually this slide. Yeah, I guess that's always an important one. Everybody wants to know. So again, we've run a ton of RFPs out there. We've used all the systems that are out there that do this, and we discussed trying to be as competitive as possible in this marketplace. So the way we are launching this is there is a setup fee. It starts at $2,500. Depending on what customization we do, it can go up from there. There is a minimum of 5 buyers within the system with 1 super buyer. Obviously, you have to have an admin person. The super buyer cost is $150 per super buyer. The buyers are $125. So as you can see, it's about a $650 a month cost as an entry point, and $2,500 from a setup. And again, based on what we've seen out there, it's a very competitive price point. Kurt, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you hit it all right there. Yeah,
okay.
You did.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Let's go to this one here. Is this system mobile friendly? So I'm suspecting that they're asking regarding the mobile on a desktop and maybe a mobile version as well.
Yeah. Why don't you let me take that one?
Handle that?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So right now, the DirectRFP is mobile friendly, and we're in the process of building out a mobile application that will be available over the next 90 days. And this application is going to make it very easy for any of the buyers and vendors to be able to handle all the action items, from approving documents to responding to messages, creating messages, suspending users, handling permissions, things of that nature. So it's going to be very, very user-friendly.
Perfect. Okay. A couple more here. What are some customizations that you provide for DirectRFP?
Yeah, so the customizations that we've done for existing clients today are things like they want different color schemes. There's terminologies that they may use internal to their business, that they want the language to be a little bit different within the platform, which we've done. Logos on the tool. So anything along those lines. We candidly haven't had anything, I can tell you this, from a customization that we haven't been able to do. It just comes down to time and effort at that point.
Perfect. Okay. And the last question for today is, can you run multiple RFPs at the same time?
Yeah. So the system is, if you will, limitless on that. So you can actually run, and kind of as I showed you here, let me just show you one more time. Kind of as I showed you over here, within the system on the dashboard, you can actually see, you'll be able to see all the RFPs that are going on. So again, simultaneously, you can have as many RFPs going as you want. The other thing I just want to make a quick mention of, and we're not going to show it today, but that is a great feature of it. When you create a new RFP, you can really quickly and easily clone an existing RFP, which I talked about. You can also upload legacy RFPs. So for any of you that have old Word doc legacy RFPs and you want to see how this works, I really stress reach out to us. This is a feature that is, for many of our customers, a game changer for them, to be able to take an old RFP and quickly upload it into the system or clone the old RFP. It really is a quick and easy way to just show you how you can recreate something. So I just wanted to mention that.
Cool. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's one of the coolest features in the whole platform, and there's a lot of cool features. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that is it for questions. We'll thank you to everybody who stood in there for the webinar. It's probably my first one ever where I've been involved with. Is we had one person leave during the entire webinar. So obviously it's a very exciting area, and we hope the presentation was useful to you. As Jason mentioned, we'd be delighted to give you and your procurement team a personalized demo to meet your needs in your RFP procurement processes. Please reach out to us at any of these contact points, by phone, by email, and on our website. So The webinar is recorded. We'll give you the link shortly in the next few days. This will conclude today's webinar. Thanks for being here for us today, and have a great day. Take care, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.